Hi, I'm Eliza David. Hope everybody is doing great. Welcome to The Source, God's answers to life's hard questions. And anyone who follows me on social media surely knows that I do not run out of questions. Recently, I fell upon a question that I found very interesting. And that question was asked by Pew in 2019, and they took it across the globe. The question was, do you have to believe in God to be a moral person? 45% of the respondents said yes, which means that 55% believe that you do not have to believe in God to be moral. Now that leads me right into this week's parasha, Parasha Yitro. In this week's parasha, we receive the greatest gift that humanity has ever received. It's a gift we received 3,333 years ago, and yet it is still thriving and surely not obsolete. And that gift is the Torah and the 10 Commandments. Now, most people who claim to be great people say, I don't need the whole Torah, all 613 commandments. I'll do the 10, and that's good enough for me. Oddly enough, most of those people can't list all 10 commandments. And what is the first commandment? The first commandment is, I am the Lord your God who took you out of Egypt. Now what's strange about that commandment is that it's not a commandment at all. It's a sentence. I am the Lord your God who took you out of Egypt. Except that that first commandment is the basis upon which all the others make sense, and the basis upon which all the others become timeless. Because if we do not believe that God is the origin of all life, that he created this world ex nihilo, that he created all the other 9 commandments, then what relevance do they really have? And do they become obsolete when times change, things change? You see, if we look at the other trends in life that come and go, we could see that morality has an expiration date. For instance, in ancient times, people used to sacrifice their children to the gods. Good thing it stopped, but who decided it was bad? Why did that become wrong? At the time, it was not a morally bad thing to do. It was a good thing to do. They pleased the gods and sacrificed their children according to their belief. Even in our day, across the globe, 12 million young girls a year are child brides. That means that they're 15 years old and younger. Now, in some countries, that happens. In other countries, it's against the law. So what is morality? Is morality an ever-shifting chameleon that fits into our lives? Or is morality something that's eternal? And if it is something that's eternal, then it had to be created by an eternal maker. And that is, I am the Lord your God. A funny word is used in Hebrew for God to introduce himself in this commandment. And it's not the common Hebrew word, ani, which most people know if they have basic Hebrew, ani, me or I am the Lord your God. But the word is anochi. And why is that word used? Because anochi means that the relationship is not based on anything. If I am ani is based, me, I am I, because you are you. And it's dependent on something else. But the word anochi is not dependent on anything. God is God. He doesn't need you to like him. He doesn't need you to believe in him. He doesn't need you to obey him. He is God, independent of your actions, of your beliefs, of your disputes, of anything else. You are irrelevant when it comes to God. He's existing without you. But he loves us, and he created us with love. But with that love came rules. Now, a lot of people will say, listen, I believe in God, okay? So I don't need the first commandments. I believe in God. He doesn't have to command it to me. But God created the world and he left the building. God isn't Elvis, though. God is still around. Because we learn in this first commandment that God says, I am the Lord your God who took you out of Egypt. Now, you know, when you introduce yourself, you usually like to give the strongest point on your resume. God doesn't say, I am the Lord your God and I created the world. I mean, creating the world is a much more powerful, impressive thing to have on your resume than I took you out of Egypt. The fact that God says that I am the God that took you out of Egypt is meant to show us that I am a personal God. I'm personal to you. I care about you. I went down to Egypt and I took you out. Yes, God is the God who created the world and he created nature. But the God that went down to Egypt, that's the God that overrode nature. You see, people will say, only the ignorant believe in religion. I don't need the whole religion. I'm a good person. Like 55% of the respondents. What was interesting to me regarding the Pew research that I mentioned earlier is that those people who believed that they didn't need God to be moral, well, most of the respondents who felt that way were in the European countries. And I find that quite fascinating how moral they are, that they killed 6 million Jews on their watch because you can be moral without God. The German people were very educated. They were not, as they call the masses, who take in the opium of religion. These were smart, educated people, and all their poetry and their literature and their opera somehow didn't prevent them from throwing live people into a gas chamber, into burning fires and mass executions of children and of innocent people. So when it comes to the morality issue, it's starting to look more and more like we need God to tell us what to do. So that first commandment establishes God. Now, if you would walk into a classroom, just let's say, and someone would start telling you what to do, you wouldn't listen. Who are you? Sit down and don't tell me what to do. But if the person who is telling you what to do is already establishing that I am the principal, I am the teacher, I am the supervisor, all of a sudden you understand that there's a certain decorum and rules that have to be followed. So God introduces himself. I am the Lord your God. Rules are as good as the rule makers. And if we learned anything throughout this coronavirus is that rule makers can really not know what they're doing. I went to a hardware store recently. You can only buy white paint, as if the blue paint contributes somehow to the coronavirus. Where I'm located now, you can buy shampoo, but you can't buy lipstick. I mean, these are among the absurd things that we've all gone through with the coronavirus, with conflicting rules, laws, and regulations. There's only one who can give us rules that will last forever. There's only one that will give us rules that will imbue us and infuse us with light and with longevity and with purpose, and that is, I am the Lord your God. Understanding the first commandment is so important because it doesn't only establish I am the Lord your God, but that God cares, and that makes all the other commandments relevant. If God cares, then he's watching what we're doing. Now let's move on to the other commandments, and I hope to look at them in a unique way that makes them very relevant to your life. The second commandment, you shall have no other gods. Now, are you an idol worshiper? Most of us wouldn't think that we are, because most of us don't have a golden calf in our living room. But the rabbis teach that anything that comes between you and God is considered an idol. If you think that that doctor, that lawyer, that your money, that your stocks, that your good looks, or anything else in your life is going to be the thing that gets you where you dream to go, or that they are responsible for your well-being, well, that's considered idol worship, because there is only one thing that is in charge of your life, and that's God. Another thing that's considered idol worship is losing your cool, getting mad, getting angry, because if you get angry, it means that you think that what happens in your life is out of God's hands, and it's happening to you for some spontaneous reason without a bigger plan. Now, when somebody came along to curse out King David, he had a choice. He could have executed the man on the spot, but he didn't. What he said to himself was that if this man has come to anger me and to curse me and to tell me these things, then surely God had something to tell me. Now, if we would look at all the things that happen in our life as a message from God, then we would be speaking to God on a regular basis. So don't think just because you don't have a big fat golden calf in your living room that you are not guilty of idol worship. The third commandment, thou shalt not take the name of the Lord in vain, because the Lord will not absolve anybody who does that. You see what's different about this commandment as opposed to all the other ones? When you violate another commandment, well, God will only punish the sinner. In this case, God will punish the sinner, his family, and the repercussions are very wide and very damaging. The Talmud tells us that the earth itself shook upon hearing God's warning, because God created the world with words, and when we take God's name in vain, we are actually violating the very construction of the world. We're damaging it. The rabbis say that upholding a word is like upholding the entire universe, the entire world. If people couldn't believe in each other and we just took oaths but didn't mean them, what type of world would we be living in? There would be no boundaries, there'd be no truth, and there'd be no trust. How many times have we sworn in God's name and not followed through? We're on the airplane, we felt some turbulence, we promised that if we land safely we would do this, that, and the other thing. And then the airplane lands. And once again, we have a short-term memory when it comes to keeping our promises to God. The fourth commandment is to remember the Sabbath day to sanctify it. Now, many of us will say, well, I love my job. It's not like I'm working on the Sabbath. Well, you know, creating the world really wasn't too hard for God either. Nothing is. And yet he rested on the seventh day. Observing the Shabbat shows our faith in God. It reestablishes our understanding that God created the world, that everything came about because of his will. So when we work on Shabbat, don't tell me that you believe in God if you're working on the Sabbath, because God promised us that whatever we will lose by not working on the Sabbath, he will make up to us. And in fact, whatever we do on the Sabbath will not be blessed. Some people will say, well, there were no cars in the desert, so how do the rabbis know that we're not allowed to drive on Shabbat? Well, the fact is, one thing that it says in the Bible is that you have to listen to the rabbis and the judges of your time. And the second thing is, there are 39 categories that prohibit certain behaviors on Shabbat. Do you know what those 39 categories are? So before you become a smart aleck in deciding whether you're allowed to do something on Shabbat or not, at least learn what the rules are. The fifth commandment, honor your father and mother. Interestingly, the tablets were split in two. The first half dealt with man's obligations toward God, and the second half, man's obligations toward man. And yet, the commandment of honoring one's parents is listed on the same side as the tablet that enumerates the laws that are dedicated to God. This commandment is one of the few commandments that's listed with an incentive package, and it said, do this and your days will be long and good. Each of us is a product of a tripartite partnership, our parents and God. And when we disrespect our parents, it's as if we're disrespecting God himself. Now, most people think, well, I talk nice to my parents. It's not like I curse them out, so I honor my parents. No, it's much more than that. You're not even allowed to sit in your parents' seat. If your parent says something, you're not allowed to contradict them in a disrespectful way. If you curse a parent, the Torah calls for the death penalty. Or there's no statute of limitations on honoring one's parents. Even after a parent's deceased, your every action affects their soul. And that's why we do Kaddish, and that's why we do mitzvot in their honor and in their memory. So going around and being a miserable person where people will curse you out and the parents that bore you is not in line with honoring your parents. Never call your parents by their first name, and even if they're ill, that's no reason to disrespect them. Even more so, to be there for them and respect them at that time when they need you most. Like I said, there's no statute of limitations in honoring your parents, not in this lifetime and not when they're departed. The sixth commandment, thou shalt not murder. Now most of us would think, okay, this is when I for sure I didn't do it. But the fact is the Talmud teaches us that embarrassing somebody is tantamount to murdering them. Speaking ill of somebody, lashon hara, gossip, how your evil words can kill their life, kill their opportunities, really destroy them. That is murder. You're taking away a life that they could have had by speaking bad and eliminating great opportunities for them, either because you're jealous, you didn't like them, or even if something is true, with malicious intent, you are murdering another person. Also, it doesn't just involve somebody else. How many of us are guilty of killing ourselves, either by talking bad about ourselves, I can't, I'm not able to, putting ourselves down, really killing our own inspiration and our own confidence. How many of us don't keep our diets, don't take care of ourselves? We literally are killing ourselves slowly. Cholesterol, diabetes, hypertension. We use and abuse ourselves, killing ourselves slowly, but killing ourselves nonetheless, and that is prohibited. Even if somebody is about to die and their moments are limited, we are not allowed to hasten their death. Even just shutting their eyes is considered murder, because every second that a person is alive is a gift from God, and they're in this world for a reason. You cause them to die prematurely, you are guilty of murder. Kabbalistically speaking, the rabbis teach that every time we sin, we are actually guilty of murder, because we are killing our soul and feeding our animal soul instead. Here's a favorite, number 7, thou shalt not commit adultery. I have a friend who told me that he would never do business with anybody who he knew was cheating on his wife, because he said if he cheats on his wife, he'll cheat in business. Very interesting, because it seems that God feels the same way. The 10 Commandments, there's 2 tablets, and they're juxtaposed. Now, what's the one that stands opposite to thou shalt not commit adultery? It's thou shalt not have any other God. For God knows that if you will cheat on your mate, you will cheat on him. God is the God of loyalty, not of excuses. And there's no reason to do such things. And we justify them. My wife got fat, or my husband is lazy, and we have a long list of why it's okay to do all the wrong things. Or I'm a very generous person and I'm a good person, so this is okay. And somehow we glamorize our sin in the end. First it's feelings of guilt, but in the end it becomes a necessity, almost like you're doing a mitzvah. But God doesn't see it in that way, and one day you will pay the price. There is no sin that goes unaddressed. So it's very important not to break the boundaries, not to be over-friendly with this girl and with that guy when you're married. You really got to keep the barrier high, because it's a slippery slope, we're only human, and one thing does lead to another. A little text message leads to a coffee leads to a dinner, and a dinner leads to a hotel room. Keep your guard up. Number 8, thou shalt not steal. So many of us will feel comfortable on this one too, except that we have to expand what the definition of stealing is, as does the Talmud. Did you know that manipulating somebody is considered stealing? Gnevat dat, it's called. You go into a store and you pretend you want to buy something, and you waste the time of the salesperson who could be busy otherwise. That's considered stealing. You're stealing his time. You're stealing his hopes. Maybe he's counting on it. Maybe he's already counting his commission, and in his mind he's already buying something new for his family, or putting bread on the table because he's thinking, wow, this client is really serious. Making false promises. Giving people hope where there really is none. For instance, you are a secretary or a professional or whatever you are, and you are amplifying your capabilities so people count on you and they think they can trust in you. And in the end, you don't really have those skills. So exaggerating on your resume, that's considered stealing. A company will hire you. They'll invest time and money in you, and you're not even qualified. Again, because some of these overlap, talking bad about somebody. Lashon hara, you're stealing their potential. You're stealing their future. And it doesn't always involve stealing big things, although I remember a story growing up that my parents told me someone tried to steal a canoe from a department store in Montreal. Now that's chutzpah. But many of us will leave a Starbucks or a store, we'll take a napkin, we'll take a sweet and low. If we're not a client, we're just passing by and we're taking something. That's considered stealing. In fact, the generation of the flood was destroyed because of that. Because I take a napkin, a sweet and low, a spoon, whatever it is, so what are you going to do, sue? There's no redress for that. There's no justice. But then another person comes along and another person comes along, and it makes a dent at the end of the year, at the end of the day in a business. So stealing even small things, less than a pruta, as the Talmud says. We are not allowed to take anything that doesn't belong to us, not even from a child, not even to play a joke on somebody and hide their whatever it is and give it back to them later. Not allowed. For sure we're not allowed to steal from people, but did you know you're not allowed to steal from God? Well, how do we do that? The Torah tells us that 10% of our income has to go toward charity. It's God's money. We're just holding it in our wallet. If we fail to give the maaser, the 10%, it's like you're stealing from God. Now you could be brazen and steal a sweet and low, but I could tell you one thing. I ain't starting with the big guy. The 9th commandment, do not bear false witness. Now maybe many people would feel uncomfortable to put their hand on a Bible and take a false oath, but any oath that you take, whether your hand is on the Bible or not, is irrelevant because God is always before us. So if you swear that this person did such and such a thing and it's not true, that's tantamount to violating this commandment. Because if you destroy a person's name and their good reputation just because you want to look better, just because it's part of the conversation now and you want to fit in and contribute to the gossip, that is considered a violation of the commandments. Do you really know what the consequences of your words will be? How do you know how that person will feel or react if they ever find out what you said? Did you ever think maybe they could even commit suicide? Do you understand how one thing leads to another? The first thing that God created with the power of speech was light. Don't use your speech to create darkness, not for yourself, nor for anybody else, nor to bring darkness into the world with your negativity. Do not bear false witness, not personally, not for your business, not for any reason at all. It's written in the Torah, do not be a liar. God hates just a few things, and one of them is a liar. Because God's own stamp is emet, which means truth, and it runs the gamut of the Aleph Bet. Aleph is the first letter, Mem is the middle letter, and Tav is the last letter of the alphabet. Truth brings in every fact, not just ones that we want to say, not ones that will create a false witness. Talk the truth, know the truth, search the truth, listen to the truth, be a partner in the truth, because it's truth that's keeping this world in existence. The last commandment. And this commandment shows that there is a God, because it's a commandment that only you can see when you look into your own heart. And that commandment is, thou shalt not covet. Now when you steal, there's a witness. When you lie or adultery or anything else you do, there's a witness. But when it comes to coveting, to being jealous and lusting after something that's not yours, well, only God is the true judge of that. The 10th commandment, thou shalt not covet. Don't desire what doesn't belong to you. When you do, you're telling God, you know what, you got it wrong. My neighbor's wife should be mine. His car should be mine. His life should be mine. You got it wrong, God. I know what's better for me. In violation of the last commandment, you are ready to violate all the others. Because when you covet, you're ready to lie, you're ready to steal, you're ready to kill, you're ready to commit adultery. There are very few things that you won't do when you're jealous. But the Talmud teaches us that one who is jealous of another, not only does he not get what the other person has, but he loses everything that he himself has. The 10 Commandments, the greatest gift that humanity ever received. 7 weeks after the Jews left Egypt, they stood at the foot of Mount Sinai to receive 2 tablets that were engraved in sapphire. When they sinned the sin of the golden calf, the first set of tablets came crashing down, and the holy letters, well, they flew back up to heaven. And we learned that a life without the Word of God is very heavy. We can't sustain a life that doesn't have the imprint of God in it. So just like the 10 Commandments, make room within your own spirit, within your own ego, to carve in the words of God, that they could live inside of you. The 10 Commandments was given before witnesses, and not 2, and not 4, and not 7, but 3 million people stood at the foot of Mount Sinai as witnesses to God's word. The 10 Commandments, they are not obsolete, they are relevant to our lives. And I pray that the few things that we learn together today will make a difference in your life. Shabbat Shalom.